Hello, boys and girls. This is Grandma Jill, and I have been requested by two people, not one, but two people, to read Lyle, Lyle, Crocodile. So I'm so happy to do this because, as you know, I love Lyle because he lived in New York City. Yes. Today I'm going to read the whole story. Now, I know that there are many other Lyle books. And I read this to my children when they were little boys. So we're talking 40 years ago. I don't even know how this Lyle ends. So we'll learn together, okay? So I hope you're in bed because that is my favorite place to read. And cuddle up with your mommy. And here we go. Lyle, Lyle, Crocodile. This is the house on East 88th Street. Here it is, right here, East 88th Street. I got this book from the library, by the way. Mr. and Mrs. Prim and their son Joshua live in the house on East 88th Street. So does Lyle. Listen, swish, swash, splish, swoosh. I was taking a bath long about Saturday night. No, I'm singing a Bobby Darin song for your mother. Okay, that's Lyle making those swish swash noises because he's in the bathtub. There he is taking a bath. I love bath time. I can't take a bath anymore in my house because there's no guardrail there for me. Okay, Lyle was very happy living with the Prim family. He was especially happy when he was being useful, like helping Joshua brush up on schoolwork. Very important to have a crocodile in your house to help you with schoolwork. Just ask your sister, Madison. Okay, here he is sitting with his family. My goodness, they have candles here. And here's Lyle helping Joshua with his homework. Turn the page. But if Lyle was happy, he was making someone else unhappy, perfectly miserable, in fact. That someone else was Loretta, Mr. Grump's cat. Mr. Grumps lived just 2 houses away from the Prims. Whenever his cat caught even the slightest glimpse of Lyle, she would fling herself into a nervous fit. Now, I don't know if you can tell. The cat in the window is looking at Lyle, and she's having a nervous fit. I assume it's a girl cat because her name is Loretta. Okay. Lyle wanted desperately to win Loretta over. He tried flashing his sweetest, most toothsome smile at her to show how really friendly he was. But this only frightened the distrustful animal even more. Here's Loretta. I don't know if you have cats, but when they arch their back like that, they also hiss. I know, even my cat did that to me one day when I tried to grab the dead gopher from his mouth. My cat eats animals. But he protects our house. We don't have any squirrels and gophers around my house because Berto is a hunter. Anyway, here's Loretta hissing at Lyle. And as you know, makes Lyle very unhappy. Okay. In the end, Mr. Grumps, who was even more excitable than his cat, would burst from the house, shaking an angry fist at Lyle. "Oh, something will have to be done about that crocodile," he shouted as Lyle fled to the safety of his own house. Now here's a picture of Mr. Grumps. Here he is, right here, shaking his fist at Lyle. But I love this picture because it really does look like a house in New York. The houses are really apartment buildings and they're very close together. I lived in one. I lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment house on the west side of New York. I just loved it there. Anyway, To take his mind off his troubles with Loretta and Mr. Grumps, Lyle filled his days playing with Joshua and his friends. He loved being it. Here he is, boys and girls. He's counting to, I don't know how far you have to count to, because we used to play this when I was a little girl. Unfortunately, we can't go outside and play on the street right now, but we will be able to soon. Patience, children. I know that's very hard. But here is Lyle playing with the children. Okay. He could skip double Dutch 100 times without missing. Here he is. Do you know how to jump rope? I used to jump rope when I was a little girl. We had a song, but I forget it. You're lucky. Okay, here he is jumping rope. And it came as no particular surprise that Lyle could high jump. Here's a picture of him high jumping. I know. But Loretta, who was just let out for an airing, was surprised. She was terribly surprised. Here's Loretta, down in the bottom of this picture. Her back is arched again, and she's hissing. That's what Berto does to me when I try and grab the dead gopher from his mouth. Okay. Oh! Loretta was so surprised and so shaken, she fled to the nearest tree, and no amount of coaxing would bring her down. Not until Mr. Grumps arrived to rescue and comfort her would she consider coming down. Now, I love this picture because there's a tree right outside my kitchen window, and if I wasn't so comfortable in bed, I would walk over there and show it to you. But right outside my window in my kitchen is a tree, and that's where Berto hides, up in that tree. And sometimes when I forget him in the rain, he goes up there and he waits for me to go to the front door and yell, Berto, Bertolini, come home. And he races down the tree and comes in the house. And Berto often sits at the base of my bed while I'm reading. He's not here today, or I'd show you a picture of him. Okay. Now, something will have to be done about that crocodile, stormed Mr. Grumps. Now Mr. Grumps was really furious. Now he knew he would be snappy, irritable, and impossible to live with when he returned to his job in a big department store the following day. Well, here he is. He's holding Loretta against him while Lyle hides behind what's their name? Mrs. Prim. The plot thickens. Apparently, Mr. Grump works in a department store. Did you know that? See, I didn't know this. Okay. For the next several days, Mrs. Prim thought it best to keep Lyle close at her side. Together, they fussed about the kitchen, preparing good things for the family to eat. When the weather permitted, they took lunch to the park. All right, children, here they are, preparing good things to eat. But right now, you cannot go to the park. Sad but true. But I hope you are cooking good things to eat. Making cookies, maybe? Chocolate chip cookies, my favorite. You children who are listening to this story, if you have any wonderful cookie recipes, send them to Grandma Jill, and I will read them on my next video. Yes. Okay, Lyle was always one for sharing. All right, now he's standing in the park handing out crumbs, but you don't have to do that. You can crumble up a cookie that you cooked and put it like in a little bowl here. Berto happens to love Belvita crackers. I love Belvita crackers. And so does my granddaughter, Lizzie. She's 2 years old and she loves Belvita crackers. Apparently, the cat likes them too. So get a little bowl, wherever his dish is, your cat. Do you have a cat? And put Belvita crackers there, or the cookies that you're making. Oh, here's a picture of the Prims going downtown. So much to see in the big city. I show this to you, children, and it makes me a little sad that we can't go out on the street. But we will be able to in a couple months. And even if it's longer than that, as long as we can read together, cook, bake cookies with our mothers, send cookies to our grandmother, cookie recipes, we'll be fine. I know you guys love to play on your iPads and your computers and your iPhones, even more than me. So get real. All right. Here is a picture of Mrs. Prim. I don't even want to look at this. She could spend hours just browsing around antique shops. Well, I never browsed around antique shops. I browsed around bookstores. And now I can't anymore. It was just a month ago. Just a month ago, I went with my friend Sue to Barnes & Noble out in Palm Springs, and we browsed around the bookstores. Sue, if you're watching this, hello, darling. Yes, no browsing in antique stores, Katie, mother of Colin. Lyle could spend hours watching building construction. Well, yes, my grandson Marshall and I used to love watching construction workers. One day somebody came here and trimmed the trees. We watched him, and we watched it all. Watching construction workers is just wonderful. Hopefully you can look out your window and see something like that going on. Okay. All right, here's a picture of them riding on an escalator in a busy department store. I'm not going to even show you that picture. But the story is that one day Mrs. Prim and Lyle went shopping in a big department store. Unfortunately for everyone, it turned out to be the very same store in which Mr. Grumps held an important position. The plot thickens. And unfortunately, they were to hear from Mr. Grumps all too soon. For it was his voice that suddenly broke in over the loudspeaker to announce a sale in the pajama department. Have you ever been in a department store or any store, like even the grocery store, where the announcement comes over the loudspeaker and they say, special sale, children's toys, going on in aisle 3. I know they do that. Soon we'll all go to the store and we'll buy the essential things we need. I mean, we need to stock up on the essential things, and then let's get a toy. Okay. So here we are. The Prims are in the same department store as Mr. Grumps. Lyle is also in the department store. The cat Loretta is not. Thank heavens. Okay. Immediately, it was as if everyone in the store was in desperate need of pajamas. Well, the announcement was a sale on pajamas. Separated from Mrs. Prim, Lyle was swept along with the crowd. Here he is. Now, here is a bunch of people without masks on. Can you imagine this happening today? All these people crowded together without a mask? No, not allowed. But this is a story about Lyle, and he hears a familiar voice over the loudspeaker. No, I made a mistake. Not over the loudspeaker. Lyle, Lyle, the voice called out. Lyle recognized the voice all right. And the voice as well, the voice and the face belonged to Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. I remember Hector P. Valenti in the early stories of Lyle that I read to my boys 40 years ago. Hector P. Valenti was in those stories, star of stage and screen. But what was Signor Valenti up to now? Here he is. Apparently he's selling pajamas at the department store, where Lyle and Mrs. Prim and Mr. Grumps all are. the plot thickens, boys and girls. Lyle remembered unhappily his days of traveling and performing with Signor Valenti. I don't remember what happened and why Lyle should be unhappy. Do you know? I'm going to have to find those old books and figure out why Lyle was unhappy traveling with Signor Valenti. But in spite of everything, the two were delighted to see each other once more. Here they are, so happy to see each other. We'll find out why in a minute. In another part of the store, Mrs. Prim searched frantically for Lyle. "Excuse me," she said to the lady at the information booth. "Have you seen a crocodile going past? He was wearing a red scarf." "No," answered the lady. "I have no information about a crocodile wearing a red scarf." "Excuse me," said Mrs. Prim to the sporting goods salesman. "Have you by chance come across a crocodile? His name is Lyle."
"Sorry, madam," answered the salesman. "I have not come across any crocodiles named Lyle today."
Mrs. Prim grew more and more upset. "Excuse me," she said to a man wearing a white carnation. Right here she is. And here's the man she's talking to with the white carnation. "I have lost my crocodile and I don't know what to do." Imagine. Whatever the man answered, Mrs. Prim never heard it, for his voice was lost in a chorus of other voices shouting, "More! More!" Those voices belonged to the huge crowd of shoppers surrounding Hector P. Valenti and Lyle. And because they had an audience, and because Signor Valenti could not resist showing off, he had persuaded Lyle to join him in a free performance of their old stage act. "More, more," the surprised but delighted shoppers called out, forgetting all about wanting or even needing pajamas. And here they are, doing their performance on some kind of platform in the middle of the department store. And here are all the people shouting and clapping and saying, "More, more." Now, I know you've seen videos and movies. Did you ever see the movie Big, where the little boy Joshua and his boss are dancing in the middle of F.A.O. Schwartz, the toy store? Well, they probably got the idea from this book. Mrs. Prim caught up with them just in time to hear still another voice, charged with fury, shout, "What is going on here?" This was Mr. Grumps. And when Mr. Grumps saw what was really going on, his face turned red, blue, and purple with rage.
"Madam," he gasped, "we do not permit crocodiles in this store, you know. Remove him at once."
"And you, sir," he said, pointing a dagger-like finger at Signor Valenti,
"You are dismissed."
This story, I hope it has a happy ending, but right now, Mr. Grumps is throwing the crocodile out of the department store, pointing his finger at the Prims and Lyle. Oh, something will have to be done about that crocodile. Those warning words of Mr. Grumps still rang in their ears as they said goodbye to Signor Valenti outside the store. All right, I didn't give that proper outrage. Mr. Grumps would have said,
"Something has to be done about that crocodile."
Jerry, I have to get my glasses back on to find out how this turns out. Mr. Grumps at last made good his threat to do something about that crocodile. The next day he appeared at the Prim's door with papers
authorizing Lyle to be committed to the city zoo. Oh my God, the zoo? Mrs. Prim exclaimed miserably. The zoo? Whatever would Lyle be doing in the zoo? He'll be doing whatever normal crocodiles are supposed to be doing, snapped Mr. Grumps, who wasn't being at all nice about it. The Prims examined the papers. They appeared to be in orders. Not good. There was little they could do, at least for the moment, to prevent Mr. Grumps from putting Lyle in the zoo. Lyle's first night was difficult indeed. This is so sad. Here's a picture of Lyle being carted away in some kind of a bus. And here he is behind jail, crying. Have you ever been to jail? You don't want to go to jail. Oh, poor Lyle. Not wanting to seem unsociable, he decided to join the other crocodiles, who were cozily piled together. Wait a minute, I made a mistake. I have to go back. He wasn't taken to jail. He was taken to the zoo. I'm sorry I said that. Mistake. The plot is so convoluted. But as you know, animals in the zoo have to be behind bars. So he's not in jail, but he's behind bars in the zoo. Okay. And he found a bunch of crocodiles to be with. This is a good thing. There he is on top of a pile of crocodiles. Well, I'm glad he has some friends there. Just when he thought he had gotten himself comfortable on top, he awakened to find himself crushed to the very bottom. Has that ever happened to you? You're all cozy in bed with your mother, and then another kid comes in and pushes you aside and lies on top of you. It used to happen to me. Okay. Now, Lyle's restlessness so annoyed the other crocodiles that they all just got up and stomped off in a huff. Lyle was happier during the day when visitors came. He amused everyone with his unusual tricks, and before long he was the biggest attraction at the zoo. Here he is. Now, one day, I'm going to drive to Utah. I'm going to pick up my grandchildren in Utah, and we're going to go to the zoo, and we're going to visit the crocodiles. And we'll get balloons. Okay. Lyle was happier during the day when visitors came. He amused everyone with his unusual tricks, and before long, he was the biggest attraction at the zoo. I know I read that already. Sorry. Joshua and Mrs. Prim visited regularly, arms laden with games, toys, and the Turkish caviar Lyle so loved. Mrs. Prim did her best to smile and appear cheerful, but just couldn't hide her concern. Are you feeling all right, dear? She would ask. Are you getting enough rest? Are you making friends with the other crocodiles? Do the lions keep you awake at night? Is the floor too damp? Do the flies pester you? Lyle shook his head, yes or no, depending on the question. He tried putting on a brave front, but Mrs. Prim knew very well he was unhappy and fought back her tears. Here she is at the zoo, looking at Lyle behind the bars. She's so sad. I would be sad too. One night, a new keeper appeared at Lyle's cage. Surprise! Surprise! The new keeper turned out to be none other than Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. Shh, whispered Signor Valenti. I have come to rescue you. Signor Valenti is maybe not a bad guy. We'll have to go back and read those earlier stories to find out what the problem was. But turns out he's going to rescue Lyle. Signor Valenti unlocked the door of the cage, and an astonished Lyle was set free. You can't go home again, said Signor Valenti, when they had put the zoo behind them. We'll put our old act together again, he said. We'll fly to Australia. They love us in Australia. Lyle groaned. The very thought of never seeing the house on East 88th Street again was grim indeed and too much for him to endure. Signor Valenti read his thoughts and decided Lyle should have one last look at the house on East 88th Street. Approaching the now sleeping street, they were suddenly met with a wall of dense smoke. The smoke, they realized with horror, was coming from Mr. Grump's house. While Signor Valenti ran to signal the alarm, Lyle broke into the house and rescued the still sleeping occupants. Right. Here's a picture first of Mr. Valenti, who decides he's going to stop at Lyle's house. Then here's a picture of Lyle breaking into Mr. Grump's house next door because smoke is coming out of there. He's going to rescue the inhabitants. Mr. Grump and Loretta the cat, do you think he'll be rescuing? Ooh, a gasping, frightened Mr. Grump and his cat were led to the safety of the street. Well, can you imagine? Here's Lyle rescuing Mr. Grump and his cat Loretta. You see that? Loretta is not hissing. I don't know, Berto does not let me pick him up. He sleeps on my bed. He sleeps on my chest, but he does not let me pick him up. So, apparently, oh, yes, look at Loretta. The poor cat is so sick, and Mr. Grumps is so sick, they allowed Lyle to pick them up. All right. Now the Prims and the entire neighborhood were awake and witness to Lyle's heroism. Mr. Grumps couldn't thank him enough. Ladies and gentlemen, said Mr. Grumps to the crowd of onlookers, Lyle is the bravest, kindest, most wonderful crocodile in the whole wide world. I would consider it a privilege and a pleasure to have him as our neighbor once more. Hooray, shouted the Prims. Hooray, shouted the crowd. Here they are. None of them are wearing their face masks, but forget that. This is just a story, but it's a story of heroism and help coming from the most unexpected places, the most unexpected people. Okay. Uh-oh, there's only a few pages left. Lyle moved back to the house on East 88th Street that very night. Yay! Here he is walking up the steps. When I lived in New York, I too had to walk up the steps to get my front door. There was no elevator, so I had to climb all three flights. But I just love going back to page 1 because this looks so much like the apartment house I lived in. Okay, so we're back to the end of this book where Lyle is back in his house. Now, several days later, a farewell party was given by the Prims for Signor Valenti, who was leaving to seek fortune and adventure in Australia. Remember, said Mr. Grumps, speaking to Signor Valenti, should you change your mind about leaving, a job in my store will always be yours just for the asking. We need people with your kind of talent and ability. Everybody smiled happily. Here they all are, sitting down to dinner together. That sign up there says, Bon Voyage, which, as you know, is French for good voyage, good trip. Bon Voyage. Even Loretta. The end. Well, I just loved reading that. I have no idea if my iPhone recorded this whole thing or even if I can send it to you. But if it does go to you, I send it with all my love. Stay inside. Wash your hands.